On our first and last episode of Off Color Streets Edition, we explored Denver's historically black neighborhood 5 Points, which was wonderful, but also highlighted the crisis of gentrification.
How has the neighborhood changed?
Well, of course, it's a lot more white walls.
For this pilot of Off Color mini docs, we talked to some people we thought might have some solutions for gentrification, including Colorado's new poet laureate, Denver's youngest newly elected city councilwoman, and a Canadian PhD candidate dude that we Skyped in. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. Jane Jacobs. Also my great auntie. What?
We all know shit is being gentrified like crazy all over the country. Today, we are out here in these streets, trying to see if there are any workable solutions to help mitigate or even eradicate the negative impact gentrification has on residents.
We don't have the kind of budget that allows international travel. So I talked to Jeremy Stone, Director of Community Economic Development at the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, via Skype.
If you have a tornado that rips through a town, you have millions and sometimes billions of dollars that go towards that. And when you have gentrification or these other things, homelessness, other social problems that create these really negative outcomes, we just sort of throw little piecemeal resources or planning initiatives at them. And I think that ultimately we need to treat these crises the same way that we treat other disasters. We really need to go in with holistic approaches that include a lot of investment and care. As city people, as like makers of cities or activists in cities, we have to really identify and think through every good thing we're trying to do. Every time that we're, saying, oh, well, this is going to make that community better, we really need to check in with the community and say, well, what could make this worse? What about our idea would actually have a negative outcome? And then, then proof our approaches for unintended consequences.
So I decided to talk to someone who's actually in the community and doing the work and is an elected official. Councilwoman CdeBaca is the real deal, fam. She cares and has one of our city's finest academic minds on the subject of gentrification, Dr. Lisa Calderon.
Gentrification is a civil rights issue.
Resident-led development was a key platform in our recent city council races, but I wanted to know, does it really work?
You have been fighting gentrification for a long time in your community. Do you have any solutions?
Our community has come up with a few different solutions. One of the big solutions that emerged exclusively in a grassroots way from our community is a community land trust. And we hear a lot about land trusts, but there's a difference with community land trusts. They emerged from the sharecroppers movement. And what they were was an effort for people with little resources pulling together their resources to buy land together and then steward that land as a community. So in Dudley Street in Boston, they really showed us how that can work out for housing, for businesses, for parks and open spaces. And we learned from them. We sat down with them. We did an analysis of what was available in our community. And we ended up starting one. We have 3 properties. They're scattered site. And we're hoping to continue to raise money to subsidize the cost of splitting that transaction. What you do is community stays in ownership of the land in perpetuity. And we sell the structure on the land with a land lease. And it's a 99-year land lease that's renewable. So you can buy a house, pass on wealth, pass it down to your family. But developers can never come in and buy a parcel of land from somebody who's fallen on tough times. It always has to go through the community. And the community sets the vision and bylaws for what happens to that land.
One doesn't have to go very far in any city to find a gentrified neighborhood. So let's take a trip over to the north side. I met up with Bobby LeFebre, Colorado's poet laureate, at the Versa Studio.
Bobby, it's so exciting because you have made history. You were announced as the Poet Laureate for the state of Colorado.
Absolutely.
I saw a play that you wrote, and it is called North Side! Is that too much? Is
No,
that too
that's
much?
dope.
Too much?
No,
Okay.
that's good.
This is so amazing. So it's essentially it's a young it's a story of two young couples basically trying to buy a home in the north side of Denver. Is that a good
Yeah.
assessment of?
Yeah, and an elderly woman coming to terms with selling hers.
Yeah.
Right? I want people to not be neutral about this conversation, because in that space of neutrality often exists privilege, and I would like people to understand how they feel about it, maybe educate people who don't necessarily know that this process affects people, that it hurts people, and I think that we've come across that a lot in the run of the play is that we've had people come up to us and challenge the perception of certain characters in the play. We've had people come up and challenge the story of the play. We've had other people mad that it's not the story of the neighborhood, right? And it's, how do you tell us an entire story of a neighborhood in an hour and a half? We're not trying to do that. We're trying to tell a story. I'm really honest about, I didn't write the play for gentrifiers. I didn't write the play for white folks. I didn't write the play for anybody besides the community that it's directly impacting. I think sometimes we, especially theater makers of color, we try to fit into the aesthetics of dominant culture's norms around those art forms, and I'm not interested in doing that. And so for me, hearing that theater erupt every single night with the people that I wrote it for enjoying it, that's all that I needed to know that I did a good job.
And you did too.
Yeah.
As we say, you stepped on it. Usually that's about food, but
Sure.
in this case.
I was calling the play a celebration of cultural permanence and preservation and a eulogy to things lost, right? So I wanted to celebrate the culture and history that I come from, while at the same time mourn the loss of it at the same time, right? And that's where the play lives, is at that intersection. So I believe that art is a platform for social change. Long before we see, large-scale social and political change, it's the values and the hearts and the minds of people that change before those things do. And that's where I believe that I exist as an artist.
Excessive gentrification destroys the biodiversity and ecosystem of a community. But don't get too comfy in your McMansion just yet. Brother Jeremy told me that he has an unpopular opinion that we are just in the middle phase of gentrification. Apparently, there's something called super gentrification, something about billionaires displacing millionaires, and you guys, I'm scared.
Even in upper class parts of London, where it was totally, you didn't think it could gentrify anymore. Then oil barons from the Middle East moved in, and then they were buying it out. And then, the poor multimillionaires couldn't really, compete with the billionaires. And so then they had to find other places to move to. I ain't crying a river, but what I am saying is that, that I think that this is a phenomenon that in the Western world, the colonies are moving home. They're coming back, and they're saying, all right, this is our time. And so it's not something that I think is just about the most vulnerable parts of society anymore. It's increasingly, as you said, something that's happening all across America, and it's happening in every area, urban and rural. And this is much more than just some tech bros moved in and decided to take over the mission. It's entire swaths of people taking over entire cities, inclusive of tech bros, but other people too.
We don't need to cry for the millionaires, but gentrification is a real problem that is clearly very hard to solve. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything. We can listen to people who study gentrification and learn from their work. We can keep electing officials that actually care about our most vulnerable populations, and we can support artists that are doing their part to start these conversations and put a human face to the crisis of displacement. I'm Rebecca Henderson, and this has been Off Color Mini Docs. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to our podcast, Off Color.